Okay, this is a joint meeting of the Ped Bike Transit Committee with the Public Works Committee. Dan, would you, I will call roll if that's okay with you.
Call it to order. Please call roll, Mark.
Yeah, if you call it to order, and then Public Works, would you like to call it to order?
We typically just start with.
We did it right. Okay. Peter Connor.
Go ahead.
Sean, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm just going to have to call on Don Knorr to serve as chair for the meeting without Bob Lyons.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll call Public Works to order.
All right, there we go. Thank you. Peter Connor. Not present. Ella Donner.
Present.
Ken Markert. I don't think he was going to come. He's not present. Katie Nelson.
Present.
Dan Ramsey is present. Jim Schutz. Jim, are you present? Pat Trainer was going to be absent. Susan West is present. Nate Day.
Present.
And Dana is not present, so we do not have a quorum. We only have 5 present. Did anybody just join the meeting from Ped Bike Transit that who didn't hear their name?
Mark, Jim Schutz is here. He's just muted.
Okay. Yeah. I don't see everybody on my screen. Sorry. Right. There's a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then we'll get the meeting started. Could I get a motion for the minutes of January 27th from the Bike and Ped Committee?
Move approval. This is Susan.
Do we have a second? I'll second.
Oh.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the January 27th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we're now on to the discussion items, University Corridor Plan.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Daphne. I am the lead with the city for the University Avenue Corridor Plan. And with me, I have Paul from SRF, who is our consultant that's making the plan. Paul actually has a brief presentation for like 10 to 15 minutes. So Mark, if you could actually stop share, sorry for all the trouble. And then Paul can pull up a presentation, and then afterwards we'll have some time for discussion, and we're mostly looking for input on our like multimodal mobility recommendations, but happy to take any other input as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Daphne. As Daphne said, Paul Chullivold with SRF Consulting here. Mark, I am on 6720 Frank Lloyd Wright here in Middleton, not in British Columbia, but sounds like you're having a good time out there. So really excited to be here tonight, just to kind of go over what we've been up to the last 6 months in developing the University Avenue Corridor Plan. So before I get started, I just kind of wanted to let everybody know as I go through this. I got 15 slides or so, but if I get going too fast or you have some questions, feel free to jump in and interrupt. I like that way to the best. But why are we developing this plan? We understand that the corridor itself, the University Avenue corridor, is changing and changing quickly. We wanted to set a vision and goal for the corridor over a 10 to 20 year timeline. So it's very important to understand, since COVID-19 and well before that, the corridor just in these 2 or 3 years has really changed a ton. But we are looking forward 10 to 20 years right now on the whole corridor as things like density and transit and pedestrian friendly things are explored. We want to develop a consistent standards for the entire corridor. We want to protect the investment of the city of Middleton and understand prioritize the investments throughout the whole project. We want to increase housing and mixed use developments and densities, kind of getting used to that transit and that multimodal component. And finally, we want to increase walkability. We want this to be a corridor for all. We want it to become less auto-centric, or if it's going to stay the auto-centric that it is, we want to at least put in recommendations to increase transit use. So a little bit about the corridor itself. It's 1.5 miles. It includes Parmenter Street here on the west, traveling eastward or eastbound towards University Avenue to end at Allen Boulevard. We did include 1 block north and 1 block south, so includes Franklin and Elmwood Avenue. And we did consider some of the development around Middleton High School as well. Just having that understanding and some of the multimodal pieces and understanding how people are accessing the school and using University Avenue is an important element of this. As we put this together, we put 5 chapters really in front of you tonight. After a brief introduction of why and what we're planning for, we set up the existing conditions up front to really set the tone for chapter 5 for the recommendation. So the existing conditions kind of preface the recommendations that will come through chapter 5. We included a comprehensive and robust planning process through all, and I'll explain the elements that we did to include that and the feedback that we received. And then we wanted to develop visions and goal statements, aspirational principles over the 10 to 20 year time period. So as I discussed the planning process, we really began back in July, and it kicked off with a half-day, what I call a kickoff meeting and ad hoc meeting. So council put together the ad hoc committee that would be responsible for overseeing the development of the document, as well as providing input on the deliverables at various times throughout the process. And then we, on that same day after the kickoff presentation, we all put on these wonderful looking yellow vests and participated in a 3-mile corridor walking tour. We started at City Hall, went all the way down the corridor and then all the way back. And really that was an opportunity for us to just collect and hear firsthand the comments that the people that know and live and breathe this corridor the most had to say about it, to really see if us as residents, us as consultants had a lot of the same opinions, or if there was differing opinions or objectives throughout the way. And then we got into setting up, once we knew what was going to happen or what the issues were, we developed a 20-question online community survey. And the online community survey was given on really multiple platforms. We used links, we used QR codes, hard copies, libraries, senior citizens. We translated the community survey into Spanish, and we delivered postcards, as well as we used the QR codes at the festival, at the Good Neighbor Fest, as part of the parade, where people could actually walk up, scan the signs, take a quick survey, and go provide their input through that means as well. We also had, like I said, as of this week, produced what we call draft 3, which is kind of the live view document that's been posted as of March 1st onto the website. Our goal is to keep that up now for 3 weeks. So obviously with the pandemic and the city kind of going back and forth between we're open, we're closed, we have access to the document online. It isn't one night that you have to show up for a meeting just to provide input. And if you miss it, you're out of luck. This is open and ready for anyone to provide comment now for the period between March 1st and the Plan Commission recommendation meeting. Here we are tonight on March 7th, presenting to you guys the Bike, Ped, and Transit Committee, as well as Public Works, and getting your feedback and opinion really as they relate to just 7 of the 21 recommendations on the plan. In 2 weeks, we plan to have an open house, an in-person event where Daphne and I will be there to answer any questions. Again, I have the document there, just providing another opportunity for residents to provide input. We will be then hopefully take it to recommendation to the Planning Commission. After all the comments are collected, we make final changes to the document, and hopefully the Plan Commission feels that the document is suitable. At that point, we would ask for a recommendation from the Plan Commission on March 22nd. And if so moved, the Common Council would be open to adoption at their April 5th meeting. So as we developed the University Avenue corridor, as a result of the community input and the comment we received down all the way from the comments that were following all the way through, the 399 responses really fell into one of 4 buckets. And that was these 4. We have icons that are going to be consistent throughout, but really what it comes down to, it's a safe corridor for all. We wanted to look for opportunities for development and redevelopment. We wanted to identify sense of place and making sure that our aesthetics are welcoming in a place that people want to gravitate towards. And then finally, not only just a safe multimodal corridor for mobility for people on the corridor, but for people to access in and around the corridor. So getting into and out of the businesses and being able to access and circulate around the parking lots as well. And like I said before, tonight we're going to really just focus on the 7 recommendations that are really pertinent to transportation. Here they are in a nutshell. As I said before, there's 21 total recommendations. The 7 that are under the umbrella of safe multimodal movement recommendations. These things are like sidewalk and terrace upgrades, crossing upgrades at signalized and unsignalized intersections, implementing mid-block crossings, the potential and exploring the use of a 10-foot multi-use path on the corridor, exploring things like sight distance and the connections to bus rapid transit. And not only the location and the priority is called out in each of these, but we also dig in. One of the things that was brought to our attention in draft 3 was Abby wanted to use this for budgeting purposes. So taking a high look at costs and understanding that this in today's dollars, this is what it would cost to implement some of these things that are a priority to the city. We give some detail. We provide the best practices. These can be engineering guidance or planning documents that help you understand why we're doing what we do and why the recommendations do have sound planning and engineering judgment. And we also look into potential funding sources. So things like grants or other opportunities that we can to help the city offset some of the costs. So maybe what I'll do here, just because it's easier to see for me, is I'm gonna explain the next slides this way. And this is just straight from the document, kind of going on page 38 of the document. And I think what our agenda kind of focused on was page 38 and forward. So for the multimodal upgrades, before we get into what these look like, each of the recommendations that we line up here correspond to the priority. So for example, the sidewalk here is our #1 priority. And then there's things like #2 is upgrades at signalized intersections. And you'll see multiple occasions where these would be at the 5 signalized intersections. So just knowing that each of the recommendations have 1 or more locations to go with each of these. This helps us just to kind of see how everything looks graphically, in addition to how these lay out recommendations wise. So again, just to give you a flavor of what these look like, each of these, again, is the sidewalk and terrace upgrades would be the recommendation. We would provide a background, which is a reason why we're recommending, what we're recommending and why. The corridor location, and in some instances, this can be a segment or this could be multiple locations. Priority, either low, medium, high, or in some cases unknown. We give it a rough cost estimate. Now, this should be known that cost estimates and the single dollar signs are 0 to 50,000, actually 0 to 25,000, 25 to 50,000, and over 50,000 for the $3 sign things. Now, some of these have multiple options, and so unknown could be checked, or there might be different dollar cost estimates between each of the buckets. And so just the first one, as we talked about, we go into recommendation details. And in some cases, these go into a second page. So think of it as a one-page document where it's a standalone duplex side where we get into applicable best practices as to why we're doing what we do with either an illustration or a reference to a material. And then in the cases where relevant, being able to click directly into some of the funding and grants programs throughout this whole opportunity. So I'll just start. And again, I just want to hit these at a high level, really wanting your input. There's 7 of them to go over tonight. And the sidewalk and terrace upgrades really talk about some areas in sidewalks. This is a good example. We have meets the absolute minimum per accessibility standard. So areas where the sidewalk is only 4 feet wide, we want to obviously have a wider corridor, wider sidewalks equal more pedestrian comfort. And this combined with additional terrace width in there just leads to a more comfortable corridor for pedestrians and bikes. And it also allows for things like public transit components to be added in there. It's not conducive in a 4-foot sidewalk for head-to-head traffic. Not good for bikes, or in case where you all of a sudden get spooked out that we would, have to, whoa, get out of the way. And now you're stepping right on the oncoming traffic. It's a potential safety hazard. So looking for things like this. Terrace widths that are really like 1 and 2 feet wide don't provide for adequate snow storage. So in an event like today, the snow plows come on University Avenue, throw it right back onto the sidewalk. And, if you're a wheelchair user, you may be stuck in a situation where you can't traverse the area. Or then again, the person who's supposed to be putting the cleaning up the sidewalk in front of their home is throwing it right back out onto the road. And so adequate snow storage especially is a concern throughout this. So the recommendation is to continue to increase sidewalk and terrace widths in that whole area between Parmenter and Branch Street when future projects and opportunities occur. These can either be on a block by block basis or a parcel by parcel basis. It allows not only for safe accommodations, but allows for artwork and tree plantings, kiosks, or even potential street furniture to be implemented over time. There are funding programs out there to pursue if interested in taking a larger piece, like I said, of the whole, if you're interested, if the city wanted to do the whole corridor at once or do a half mile at a time. There are some good opportunities, some good grant programs out there that could explore those. So number 2, this is a fun one. This is one that generated a lot of discussion with our ad hoc committee. There's 5 signalized intersections on the corridor. And as you can see, Parmenter, Park Street, Allen Boulevard, Branch Street, and Bristol are those locations. And each of these locations have different priorities and different costs based on what we think are the issues there and the pedestrian, the amount of pedestrians at either peak hour or at peak times or at generation things. So for instance, Middleton High School generates a lot of traffic, pedestrian traffic. Sauk Trail Elementary might as well. And then of course you have the Park Street intersection, which is just a busy corridor near a grocery store and near some recent development in the area as well. So these 5 signalized intersections all have crosswalks, and they have differing volumes throughout the whole process. And I think that's worth reiterating the fact we didn't go through and collect pedestrian counts. That is something that would need to be done. So these are just on observations of the consultant team, city staff, and the ad hoc committee to help us kind of say, yep, Parmenter, Park, and Allen might be needed more than Bristol would be, or needed more than Branch Street, or the fact that, the Parmenter Street location already has some really good things going for it through recent reconstruction and investment. So for these 5 locations, like I said, I think it's worth reiterating, further studies are needed to identify, where those peak hour opportunities are, not only from a pedestrian side, but for bicycle use as well. For example, we want to understand that peak flow at times of day to understand where we might need guidance to get us across. If it's an area that's used by young users, audio things might be good. If it's good for older users, reading and signage with larger kind of prompts and cues might be also good things to think about. And things like signal timing or adjustments like right in, right out, right turn, things are all things that we could look into. I want to pull this example up. This is kind of a cool area. Allen Boulevard, right? We have a recently completed path, a pedestrian 10-foot path in the city at the Imperial Garden. This requires a user right now to make a 3-stage crossing of Allen Boulevard just to get to the other side, which is a potentially unsafe location. So understanding these types of things throughout is very important. This particular one, I want to pull some attention to some of the different infrastructure that can be used, and just so you can get a feel for why some of these are just not a one-size-fits-all approach. Costs for some of these things range between $3,000 or $1,000 per crossing, all the way up to $50,000 or even in some cases $170,000. And what we did was we just put together some of the uses where the infrastructure, things like high visibility crosswalks or pedestrian island refuges might be good, good locations. And we applied those to areas where the city would want to continue to conduct further study. I'll do a similar here when it gets to uncontrolled crossing upgrades. Now, these are areas on 7 existing uncontrolled areas that have marked crosswalks, but no other audio or visual cues for those crosswalks to cue the pedestrian to cross. Again, we have different levels of priority. Park Lawn Place was one that was identified as a unique situation. I'll talk about that one a little bit. But we have Middleton High School just up to the north and west of the picture here. And what it does is that currently people in some cases have to get onto and cross University Avenue to park along Elmwood Avenue. And what this actually does, there's 3 crosswalks at the Park Lawn Place intersection, but oddly enough, it doesn't align with where the cut-through path is. So in this particular example, students that would use from Middleton High School would have to use Franklin Avenue, come down to Park Lawn Place, cross it, go down Park Lawn Place, and instead of just crossing University Avenue in this green location, would need to first cross Park Lawn Place again to a marked crosswalk, come down, and then utilize the path coming through. So in this particular situation, just putting in a crosswalk to finish the 4 quadrants of the intersection makes the most sense, and potentially adding some signage in here to let people know that, hey, you know what, this is not just a shared driveway. There's actually a path that comes through here, and we're actually trying to tell users to use it. So looking for unique situations like that. As we get down to the applicable best practices, here's an example of a little bit higher cost option. It's actually quite a bit higher cost, but these are pedestrian hybrid or RRFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And what these do is at a mid-block crossing when there otherwise isn't any sort of indicator, this could be used at a peak hour or at other points. It alerts the motorist that, there might be things coming. You see these all around the way on Gammon Road by Madison Memorial High School. You see them across all different areas of the city. And these might be potential good options for a few areas along University Avenue, where it's just like, hey, we want to make pedestrian crossings a priority here. We want traffic to slow down. This is a City of Middleton street. We can do this. The investment, I will get into in a little bit, but it really does. You're driving down the corridor, you see a light flashing, you know a pedestrian's coming. You'll slow down at the stop bars and wait for the pedestrian to cross. And very effective, very safe alternatives. They do come with a cost, right? We talked about some of those options last time being $1,000 or $1,500 per crossing. To implement something like this can be $100,000 to $170,000. So that does require a big investment from the city to plan for. in their budgets each year to kind of go through. But we did look at 7 different locations throughout the corridor for opportunities for uncontrolled crossing upgrades. Just a couple more to hit on here today. A mid-block crossing is also something we looked into. So for areas from North Gateway Avenue over to Allen Boulevard, we have some development going on, or recent development projects that have occurred. The Philbin was recently reconstructed. We have the Landell and Lakeview Gables apartments down here as well. And then we're looking for a redevelopment of the parcels just west of the Chalmers Jewelers property. And so obviously density is increasing here. And right now, the current recommendations for guidance is that a crosswalk should space about 600 feet, or about a 3-minute walk. And right now, that existing distance on Allen Boulevard over to Gateway is 1,280 feet, or roughly a quarter of a mile. And what that is basically saying is, as development and pressures get in, the likelihood of someone coming out, walking to one of these crosswalks to come back to load a transit, a bus or something like that, is less and less. People are of human nature are just going to take the path of least resistance and unsafely shoot the gap and try to cross 4 lanes of traffic or 5 lanes with that 2-way left turn lane. So an opportunity is to explore a crosswalk somewhere in the middle of the existing, somewhere around this 35-mile-an-hour sign. And a perfect example would be to use the pedestrian island as a pedestrian refuge, and perhaps look to implement a mid-block crossing to alleviate that 1,280-foot distance here. This one generated a great deal of excitement. A multi-use path along Allen Boulevard to Branch Street. And I wrote down some notes here so I don't get out of line. So we know the University Avenue corridor has limited area for a potential, for bike and pedestrian accommodations right now. But with the recent completion of the bike path east of Allen Boulevard, we explored the possibility, and I want to say that very carefully, we explored the possibility of the next logical connection westward between Allen Boulevard and Branch Street. And what we found was that we could, by engineering standards, develop a separated 10-foot multi-use path along the duration of the north side of the road from Allen Boulevard to Branch Street. And believe it or not, on the south side as well, if that was an option that was willing to be explored. So to make this work, this does require a lot of careful planning. So here's where the cost estimate is a $3 sign, right? We don't get so specific because this might be something that goes into a long-range plan. Now, remember what I said at the beginning of the presentation, 10 to 20 years is what we're looking forward here. So does this fit a 10 to 20 year horizon? I think so. Could it go away tomorrow and be shelved for 5 years? Absolutely. But we would need to do careful planning studies, survey, preliminary and final design, numerous environmental studies, and construction would still need to occur. Likely a multi-year effort for a project like this to happen, and costs that are going to definitely exceed several $100,000. But this may make sense. This may make sense for a multitude of reasons. It's for safety. It gets people off the road and separated from traffic. It's the next logical connection, working on a path that really goes from downtown Madison all the way westward through Hilldale and connects all the way into your community. It brings a safer connection for Sauk Trail Elementary and safe routes to school, and the multi-use path that's in that area as well. And it meets the conditions for FHWA for the best practices here as well. So that's when we get to volumes that exceed 10,000 ADT. We look at a separated, isolated 10-foot path, and this seems to check a lot of the boxes here. Again, for a project of this magnitude, there's funding programs available and many, many examples of best practices, including some of the studies that the city has already undertaken for areas across the city in the past. And the last two, again, these are 6th and 7th on the priority. Site distance is always something that should be looked at, and encroachments on the corridor. obviously you have things like these awesome large trees, right? And they do potentially cause a safety hazard. So I'm not going to tell you to go in there and get rid of these trees or cut them down, but I'm saying in the life of a 10 or 20-year plan, a tree or an encroachment or something might get in the way that we can clean up. And we should always look for opportunities to clean things like this, to improve those vision corners and to make it a safer place for multimodal. There's areas like this in front of the Middleton Sport Bowl. Whereas if you're heading, westbound on here, you're walking down the path, let's just say you were riding a bike through here, traffic just pops out of that Willie Street Co-op. So it puts a potential dangerous situation. Just across the street here at Kestrel, that building is brought right up to the road, 25 foot, 20 foot setbacks. And again, for the behind the building parking, can sometimes jet out. And I know construction equipment was doing that when that building was being built. So just being mindful and looking for areas like that to improve upon. And finally, and lastly, bus rapid transit. And for this situation, up until the start of the year or even into January, Middleton had a seat at the table with the city of Madison and Metro Transit to potentially explore bringing BRT traffic along the University Avenue, this orange segment here. And unfortunately for the city, right now the BRT is moving forward with a preferred alternative that uses Mineral Point Road, goes down Whitney Way and then kind of goes behind the Hill Farms buildings at Sheboygan before entering University Avenue and heading into downtown Madison and beyond. But we shouldn't be quiet here. The city should always look to explore and make improvements as we densify and make improvements on the corridor. We should look to continue those discussions with BRT in the city of Madison to explore expanding the BRT out this way. And if it's not BRT, at least looking at to improve existing transit opportunities for the corridor. So that's basically it. As I was saying before, we go through 14 more recommendations, but for tonight's presentation, I just wanted to limit it to just the 7 transportation segments here tonight. So with that, Daphne and I are here to take any questions that you have.
Does anybody from Bike and Ped have any questions or comments?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I have one question. You just spoke just a moment ago about the Kestrel and the building closer to the road like that. So are we making a mistake? Because when that went through the planning, that was planned that way. And that's kind of the new urbanism. Are we making a mistake by having our buildings too close to, or planning our new development, infill development too close to the road so that we're limiting what we can do for safety?
Good question. And it is something that the plan does explore. I think what the biggest thing is we want to try to develop a consistency in that setback distance. And it's not always a one size fits all approach, but it's general guidance, right? And I think we've kind of determined a few examples, and actually the Kestrel is right. That example is a perfect example because 20 feet one building and the very next building next door is 75 feet. So it's kind of the two extremes, and then it kind of moves back up to a 25 foot, almost the kind of preferred alternative, if you will, for setback distance. So those 3 properties right in a row from the Kestrel, and I think it's 6801 University. Those are the 3 properties right above, right across the street from Middleton Sports Bowl that we used as some of that guidance. And to answer that question, we've kind of said 25 to 50 feet with a more kind of a guidance towards bringing it closer, using 25, 30 feet when we can would be the optimal standards. But what 50 feet would allow you to do is to have 1 row of parking in front of the building. And that's a big selling point to some of the business owners.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things that we were getting away from with bringing the buildings closer was to have the parking more in the back. But so you say the optimum then from a safety point of view, a setback point of view would be 25 to 30?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just think for the walkability piece of it as well,
Sure.
if we want to develop a corridor that's transit TOD focused and, would actually get, the passerby walker to come in and shop or stop in at a retailer, that's probably the preferred distance that we'd want to adhere to.
Okay, thank you. Katie?
Thanks, Dan. Nothing as good and comprehensive as yours. I just wanted to comment that I really love the way your presentation was laid out. I think this is going to be a really nice way for the residents in the city to understand our goals. And I thank you for all of your work. And Daphne, I know you've done a ton of it too. So thanks.
Thank you, Katie, for your commitment. Katie was one of those on the ad hoc committee and very busy reviewing materials throughout this process. So thanks for your work as well. Right back at you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from Bike and Ped?
How about Public Works? Anybody from Public Works have any questions, comments?
Bob just said I'm turning over chairmanship back to you.
Well, you don't need to do that, but I felt obliged. I'm sorry I'm late. I had connectivity problems again, but I'm
Can't
here.
believe you have computer problems, Bob. Man, yeah.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, Paul, thank you for that presentation. It was very well done, very informative. I appreciate that.
You're
Yes,
welcome. Thank
very
you,
good.
everybody.
Thank you.
Dan, if I may, this is Mark. I just
Yes,
wanted
please.
to make one comment. I was wanting the committee members to go first, have the opportunity to go first. I really like the idea of extending the bike path, a shared use path on the north side to Branch Street. West of Branch Street, we've never considered that we would have that opportunity to do that with the existing land uses, the way they are, frequent driveways, parking lots in front. So we always recognize that would be a challenge, but getting people to Branch Street from between Allen and Branch is important because then you have parallel streets that are both on the north side with Franklin and south side with Elmwood. It still doesn't solve the problem that, that Paul, that you're focusing on, which is walkability along University. So, I mean, that still is obviously a major goal here of this planning process. But the nice thing with getting the path at least to Branch Street is that there still are it gives people more choices to get to Branch and Maple Street so they can take parallel routes.
Well, you've got an opportunity to look at some of that with the two new
Right.
properties just west of Chalmers that are being redeveloped.
That's right.
Anyone else from Public Works have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I like the improvement or the suggested improvements, especially for the crosswalks. I think that will be a substantial help.
I just have one general question, I guess. I mean, I think about the notion of those RFBs, the flashing beacons, and I see them in operation on Park Street, and I see cars blow through them every time I'm there. That's just a 2-lane street. You put that on a 4-lane road with a higher speed limit and a whole bunch of high school kids that are plugged into their earphones wandering across the street. And that just seems to me to be a very potentially difficult situation. Would a traffic light possibly be better instead of those unmarked crosswalks with the beacons? People, I think, are more tuned in, drivers, to stopping at traffic lights than they are slowing down for flashing yellow beacons.
And I can take a shot at answering that. So signal placements are, considered, right? Where the spacing between where you have traffic signals, not knowing exactly which location you would be referring to, it could be difficult. But, I appreciate your comment when you said 2 lanes of traffic. You look for areas, people are blowing through those. In order for any crosswalk or an improvement like this to ever be safe, it has to be enforced, at least at the beginning. I know at Gammon Road in front of Memorial High School, that's routinely people nowadays will be picked up and getting tickets, especially at busy times. Speeding in, school zones and things like that. All it takes, is obviously it would take one event and it's a fatality or a serious injury, but getting people understanding that you're serious about it and enforcing it and ticketing people that are breaking the law through there. It's an important thing. We have to slow the traffic down for those to be effective. And again, it's a two-way cycle, right? It's not, as a pedestrian, it's my role too to understand that I can't, just because I hit that button, forge ahead, right? And unfortunately, that should be the case, but it's not. And we need to continue to work on that for sure.
Well, and I think University would be much more difficult in that respect than Gammon Road. I mean, the amount of traffic on University Avenue, the amount of truck traffic, and whatever, and the amount of transient traffic just going through that's not neighborhood traffic is probably much greater than it is on Gammon Road in front of Memorial.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a follow-up comment to that, Bob, and is it okay to?
Sure.
Okay, I'm Carrie Schaffner with Public Works. Yeah, I agree. I think all of these strategies might need to be looked at in combination, right? So I think the flashing lights in combination with the crosswalk, because what you're referring to at Memorial, I think works well because it has a combination of strategies, because it has a really well-marked crosswalk. Plus, I think there's the landing in between. So I think I like the kind of the menu of items that you've come up with so that we can really use this as a tool and kind of, look at your recommendations and where to place things. But I like the combination of items that you presented a lot.
Susan, you have a question or a comment also?
I was going to ask, I vaguely remember, I think this is correct, down on Allen Boulevard, we did have a flashing light crosswalk put in. I think we've now put in traffic light with it. But were there any significant problems when it was just the flashing light?
So we still have one on Allen. It's at Mendota.
Yeah, those are different intersections, Susan. So Mendota has an RRFB, and we just put one in over by Marshall Park's crosswalk on Allen Boulevard, but the traffic signal is up by Maywood.
Right. But are we having any problems with those?
I'm not hearing of anything. I'm not seeing anything. No.
Those
We have on Century Avenue and Valley Ridge Road, we also have an RFB, and it's it's a marked crosswalk, and in that location it's going against 4 lanes of traffic at pretty high speeds, and it seems to be working fairly well. So I think that the idea of doing it in conjunction with other methods is probably the way to go. I mean, would one of the things be to, as you increase the density on University Avenue, slowing the speed limit down?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
So
city, yeah, it's a city, and yeah. Go ahead.
Those intersections on Allen Boulevard that you were talking about have medians too, though, don't they? Which
They do have a median.
you wouldn't have that on University Avenue. There ain't nowhere to hide there.
Yeah, and Carrie, I appreciate your comment about needing multiple things. So just so there's no confusion, we're not asking or not recommending that we do 5 rapid flashing beacons throughout the corridor. And I do see benefit at different intersections. For instance, at that, I'll just use the Park Street one as well. Coming out of that Willie Street Co-op onto Park Street there's that 50 feet before you have to make a left turn. People just dart out on there, and if need to cross a lane of traffic and make a left, a hard center line right there might just be a very, very just changes the geometry of the driver and just gives him one more second to go, oh my goodness, I need to look for people, and avoid potentially a very horrible situation making a left. When all you're trying to do is, jump and get into the left lane and quick make it before the signal turns, red again, and you're making a left turn. And the last thing you're looking for right there might be a pedestrian. And unfortunately, something just changing the geometrics just a little bit might be the difference between life and death. So.
Nate, did you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, thanks,
Sure.
Paul. Great presentation tonight. Is University Avenue, is there a timeline for reconstruction of this part that we know of?
Daphne, I'll turn that one to you.
No, yeah, I think, I don't know when it was last reconstructed, way before I started, but it was, reconstructed a while ago. And so I don't think we have any plans for, the whole stretch of University Avenue. So as Paul said before, a lot of our recommendations are, kind of parcel by parcel basis. So as something redevelops, we have this plate of options to go through.
Yeah, and I would add to that, in 2017, the county reconstructed University Avenue from a point, I'll say midway between Park Street and Park Lawn Place. From there all the way to Allen Boulevard, they rebuilt that in 2017, and points west of there, the county rebuilt in 2019. So for all practical purposes, that's a new road. It was also all jurisdictionally transferred to the city of Middleton, other than about 1,000 feet. Sorry about that. Other than about 1,000 feet west of Allen Boulevard, because where it's joint city of Madison, city of Middleton, the state won't allow that to be jurisdictionally transferred.
Okay, so like recommendations like bike lanes, for example, I didn't notice those in the plan, but if we are unable to come up with the funding for something like a 10-foot multi-use path on either side, I mean, would that be a potential opportunity for bike lanes along University Avenue?
So Nate, great question. And, I think this is fun just to talk about only one of the 4 areas here, but one of the things we talked about is we need to better sign Elmwood and Franklin for the existing bike routes that exist. I think the comprehensive plan really dove into the fact that it really isn't feasible or really a safe situation west of Branch Street. And so we tried to, really focus on getting people, as Mark said, that connection just to the safe marked bike routes, but they're not marked very well. They could do, we could, as a regional user, you might get confused as to which side can we go on. So, increasing signage and to divert and let the rider know where I should be going. But we did, at a high level, Nate, looked at potential for, putting a really short 4-foot lane in there or something like that. And with the existing terrace widths and, the widths of the already 2 short sidewalks and businesses and the traffic that generated out there and the consistency with your comp plan, just didn't seem like a good idea.
Hey, thanks.
Robert, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's a great plan, and I'm very supportive of it. I do think that every committee at the city is going to have a little pushback on this option, a little bit of pushback here, but I think at least for public works, I'm not seeing anything that's like the opposite of what we would want to do or anything like that. So I think all of this is doable. It always just comes down to how do you finance, a full, like you said, 10 foot wide, multi-use path when it, we are pushing in the city to have it basically be the default to always have, put sidewalks in where there's not sidewalks. And if you want something larger, a 10-foot wide multi-use path, that's reasonable, but more expensive. I am wondering, are there certain groups that have not seen this yet? And specifically, I'm asking about like Plan Commission, because as Alder Dan Ramsey said, I know there has been a push over the last 10 years to put buildings closer to the road, have the sidewalk, not have a terrace outside of it, but just have a wider sidewalk that comes right up to the curb. And how does that, it sounds like this plan may be asking for something a little different than that, and that's fine, but at some point we'll need, as a council member, we want to have a direction that everybody can kind of agree to. And right now I feel like we might be being pushed in a few different directions.
So
It's a comment. Who wants to answer my comment?
No, and I think it's a great reminder for everybody. When we develop this University Avenue corridor plan is a visionary document. So it's very planning focused. It doesn't mean it has to all occur, right? It's aspirational in language. And some of the elements on here might be outdated tomorrow, and best practices or whatever. It allows, through the input of the city committees, the ad hoc, the citizens, you guys, and then obviously Plan Commission and the council, an opportunity to reprioritize, or just because it's prioritized one way, doesn't mean you can't do 4 before 2, or something like that. But that was one of the questions and thoughts, as we work through this process, was what's that fine line between a planning document and being visionary and not drilling down so close to the costs and the details and the timing, but understanding that, planning is about putting things into action and putting it into motion. Some of these things I presented tonight, it might take the city 8 to 10 years to fund it, or, so at least it gets us thinking about the lifestyle of the plan. We tried to be as consistent as we could with the ongoing zoning code plans that you guys have invested in as well. The recent comprehensive plan that the city has undertaken as well. So yeah, so great questions. And I guess there is no perfect answer, but those are all things that, Daphne and the city's group have helped us develop.
Yeah,
I think
and I
that's
just,
great.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Daphne.
yeah, and I'd just like to add, Robert, you make a good point. There's definitely areas where we want, the sidewalk to go, up to the curb and, buildings up close. And I think what's great about the University Avenue corridor plan is we can look, just specifically on the corridor and what works best there. And, we can generally have these practices, oh yeah, like walkability and, having, buildings closer, but then when we dig deeper into, what works best for University Avenue, I think what Paul was saying, the 25 to 50 feet setback, that's just because of, traffic volumes and all of that as well. That's a big factor into those recommendations.
Well, I really do welcome everything that this report says. I think it's really good to look at things from different perspectives, and yeah, maybe we optimize for one thing and miss out on optimizing for another. And at some point we'll find that balance. So thank you for giving us this visionary document.
You're welcome, Robert. Thank you for that comment. As we develop this too, I just wanted to point out our goal was to put something in here for everybody, right? I want that business owner to pick it up and there's something in there that they like, or, if they have comments, they can certainly provide those, but it's not like we're not adhering to something. But young and old, business owners to residents to just regional users, we just wanted something in there for everybody. And I think the document does a good job of that.
All right, Susan's had her hand up for a time here. Susan?
Yeah, I'm wondering a little bit about the bike traffic. So, and I'm thinking about when I went to graduate school in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, so this was a long time ago they did it. The main street of the town did not have room for bikes on it. So they took a side street and actually had alternate side parking at different times of the day so that bicyclists would have basically that parking lane to get into the university or later at night to get out. Could something like that be done on Franklin and Elmwood to really encourage bike traffic easily along those? And have we ever done any bike traffic counts on these roads? Mark's saying no.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
There's one other hand that's up, but I'm afraid I don't know whose it is.
Katie, looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of respond to Robert's comment. When it comes to council, how do we kind of approach this if it's the exception to the general way we're doing things? And I think Daphne really helped with the idea that that's such a heavily trafficked area to have the exception being the wider path there. Also, when I started pushing for this 3 years ago, when I didn't even know what I was talking about, I just wanted like this big, long welcome mat into the city. And so if that's the way we can think about it, that it's maybe a little bit different than the other practices. That's how, as a council member, I will think about it when it comes to time to vote for it. So anyway, that's it, Robert. Thanks.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions from Bike and Ped,
Or Public Works?
No,
all right, let's
thank you.
move on to agenda item number 2, the Elmwood Avenue.
Dan, if I can ask
Paul.
my colleagues a quick question, please. Sean
Sure.
in particular. Sean, I'm getting the dreaded computer needs to reboot message because it wants to install stuff, and I've postponed it 3 times. And when you had that problem, did you basically try and do that and then it forced you anyway to reboot?
Yeah, I think it gave me a 20-minute warning and then it just went ahead and did it.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the meeting, but either you and Daphne should be able to, I think I made you co-host, right? So,
That's
I mean, I started the meeting, but you should be able to just, but what happens to the recording is it's going to the cloud, so that should be fine too, right?
Well, I'm not
Okay,
going to
Daphne.
promise anything, but we're going to
Okay.
find out.
Well, I'd rather reboot now instead of when I'm running the meeting solo later, so I'll
And
see you guys in a bit.
Don't forget to remind Drew, because he has leaned on them after I rattled his cage about exactly this. It's just nonsense.
I mean, it was basically the dreaded 6:30, well, for whatever time it is, I don't even know what time it is now. Okay, I'll see you in a bit, in a few minutes. Bye. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. Thank you.
All right. Well, Mark has more excitement than I do tonight, and that could be a good thing, I guess. But moving on to Elmwood Avenue, then, pedestrian
Yes,
bicyclist safety.
So on this, I think that the Bike and Ped Committee was interested in chatting with you folks on this to see where Public Works was and where we could work together Bike and Ped was interested in having in the design for Elmwood, having some traffic calming things put in. So have you taken a look at any of that, Sean?
I'm muting and unmuting myself, but to no avail.
That's all right.
No, we haven't started design on that yet. It's not funded yet. And all of our folks are so busy with projects that are funded, we're just not skipping ahead right now. Okay. So I understand that that's a high interest to look at, but it'll make more sense to me if we do it with the design.
Well, and I think that's what, if I recall right, Susan, you can help me in our memory. What we were interested in as Bike and Ped was exactly what you're saying, is adding that into a part of the design of having the design done. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Susan.
Yeah. That's just what I was thinking. We need to put some traffic control measures in here. And since it's on the schedule to be redone relatively soon.
Don, refresh my memory. When is Elmwood on the schedule under the 5-year street plan?
According to this,
Well,
2024 to 2026, depending on what segment we're looking at.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
that's
the-
what's on inside our packet. I don't know if that's still correct.
I think that's the current 5-year plan, but we're having to retool that because of Middleton Beach Road, that bumped Middleton Springs Drive. And as those puzzle pieces move around with differing dollar values, we're trying to balance that with an overall capital budget limitation in mind. So Sean Ellsworth has taken several weeks to try to rejuggle those pieces. And we're about to find out what that recommendation looks like now. Because annually, of course, we update the 5-year plan. And I myself don't know what the fallout of that is on any given road. But that's one of those things we do each spring, is try to figure that out.
Okay, well, if we take it, fair enough, but if we take it at a higher level discussion then, for roads like Elmwood and Franklin, roads that we were just talking about, and, you know, I understand that my example may not be in the plan, but roads that we were just talking about trying to use as bike corridors and transportation pedestrian corridors, what the Bike and Ped was interested in doing was seeing if in some of those long stretches of road where they're long and straight and people have a tendency to speed, we were looking at the possibility of in the design, when those roads get redone, that we put in some traffic calming measures like what are in our what do we call it? Our
The neighborhood traffic management
Yep.
program.
yeah, that's it. Very good, thank you. Our neighborhood traffic management program. You know, there's way too many acronyms.
Well, yeah, it needs more vowels or something.
Yeah.
NTMP doesn't sound quite right.
It just doesn't roll off the tongue very easily.
Sounds more like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thing. But yeah, exactly. So Maywood Avenue, when we reconstructed that, the design of that included some traffic calming features. And it wasn't, our normal program is for a neighborhood initiative. And so that the input is coming from the ground up and not from the top down. But it takes an awful lot of legwork and voting and then budgeting. And if it can be done right with a program, a design of a programmed road, the trade-off is that it is more of a top-down answer, but it's a lot faster and it just gets absorbed in the budget. So it's the kind of thing, in fact, planning staff really led the charge on converting some of our collectors class roads like Parmenter and High Road to eliminate parking on one side so that we could paint bike lanes on both sides.
Sure. Well, in this, and using Elmwood as an example, because part of this was brought to Bike and Ped by concerned residents of Elmwood. So that, you know, it's already kind of been brought to us by the user. So we've made it through that step then, right? Am I
Well,
understanding that
yes,
correctly?
yes and no. We certainly have heard from some residents. The voting block sends out a ballot to every eligible person. And then it has a minimum threshold of returned ballots with a majority in favor of a traffic feature. Believe it or not, some people hate these things. We don't often hear about them until after we build something. And so it's nice to be able to say, hey, you had an opportunity to vote on this. When we just designed it into a project, their opportunity for input really is during preliminary design to say, I don't like that. But they do have that opportunity.
I'm breaking rank here. This is Kieran Furlong. There are a number of neighbors on the call here, Sean. We are the ones who brought it to Dan Ramsey, and we're very interested, and we will get it in front of every resident and get a vote if we need to.
Yeah, and typically when we're doing it as part of a road design, which is also in our neighborhood traffic management program, that that's a viable alternate way to get traffic calming features into a road. It's coming from the city. So again, it would be somebody showing up and saying, you know, don't do that, or move it in front of their driveway, not mine. You know, it's that kind of input, but not a voting kind of issue. We don't vote on street plans. Now that said, you'll remember, many of you will remember, just east of Cromrie Middle School, there were a couple of small-ish streets, and we decided not to build new sidewalks on those existing streets, but also not to put a traffic circle where 3 streets converged at an intersection. We did build a median island in Donna Drive, though. So sometimes some stuff gets built, but not everything gets built, even if we look at it as a design.
So Sean, what is the process if we wanted to get some sort of traffic calming that's not terribly expensive and wouldn't necessarily be that could be done without rebuilding the road? What would be the procedure, since we've got residents that are concerned and want this? What would we need to do?
Well, it might depend some what it is, but you know, there are some things that we probably would rather build with the road, knowing that the road is getting reconstructed relatively soon, instead of building it right now in 2 years, rebuilding it. But again, depending on what it is and where it is, and I don't know that without a design. But if we follow that alternate process, I would say it takes a neighborhood work group to work with engineering on a design, to get to a vote, to get to budget consideration. And that all takes time. We might be building the road by then anyway.
Katie, you have a question?
I do, thanks. To the Public Works folks, I think when we were chatting about these traffic calming ideas for Elmwood, we were talking about it going into the new sections, and we talked about these calming circles where there's like low plantings of like native plants. I suggested that would be a nice combination of our sustainability goals of not having so much concrete. Emergency vehicles can drive right over them. And then my question was, can those be retrofitted? For example, Elmwood at Park.
It probably wouldn't lend itself very well to an Elmwood at Park situation, but an Elmwood at Bristol or an Elmwood at Middleton, it probably could.
Yeah.
If you go by the Madison West High School neighborhood, they have traffic circles retrofitted all over those streets.
Right. I thought that those would be really great, as opposed to speed bumps that bicyclists have to go over and plows have trouble with, etc. So anyway, thank you.
So Sean, putting in those smaller traffic circles, it's not really a possibility now?
It could be done now. I don't know what utility work we've got going on with that street right offhand. I mean, I wouldn't want to put it in an intersection and then find out we have to do some water main that goes through it. It'd just be a waste of time and money.
John, we need parks.
Oh, sorry, Don. Could you repeat
Yeah,
that?
would we need parks buy-in? Somebody's got to maintain these circles with the plantings, and I know neighbors all over would just love to do it, at least for 2 or 3 years until it becomes too difficult, and that would be the concern. Then who takes them over? Parks?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, we don't have a ton of landscaping in streets, but we do have some neighbor
Does he-
groups that adopt these things.
Yeah, who does the boulevards on Allen?
I don't know.
Public lands.
Robert, you have your hand up.
I do, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like the question I was going to ask is, what are we talking about? There's a lot of different things in the MP speed humps, circles, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, all sorts of different things. Are we kind of settling in? It sounds like the people who have maybe talked about this in the past are maybe more interested in the small traffic circles. Is that a correct assertion, or is it really still up in the air?
Oh, well, the intent of the Bike Pedestrian Committee, and Katie and any of the members of the committee, correct me if my memory is incorrect, but the entire purpose of this subject matter was to bring this to Public Works so that when we go through the designs of new streets, and we were specifically speaking of Elmwood that is coming up for design soon, that when we went to design, we would design them with some of these traffic calming and whatever they would happen to be. We hadn't decided on anything. We wanted to work in conjunction with obviously engineering and Public Works. One of the things that seemed to have gotten a lot of interest was like what Katie said, or a traffic circle, or various different ways of street narrowing. I mean, we talked about a number of different things. We're not the engineers, so we didn't decide on any one thing, but that's why we're here with you, is because we want to figure out what works and what conceivably could work. And then we would like to see that Bike and Ped would like to see those items put in documents so that when the design work comes out, we have a street that's designed with these traffic calming items in them, so that we actually know what the budget is and we know how to get them done.
That makes sense. That's what I was looking for. Is there a direction yet, or is it really just a question to say, how can we do this? What's the most effective thing? And it sounds like that's where we're more at. Is this something that Public Works can look at as we move toward the reconstruction of these roads? And I'd say, I don't want to speak for Sean, but I don't see why we couldn't look at these things. I do have a quick question. I prefer the roundabout type of traffic circle things where possible, because I think they're less obtrusive to emergency vehicles and things of that nature, and bicyclists. Does that change though, Sean? Do you know of small little traffic circles at intersections? Does that change like ADA ramps or anything for sidewalks at intersections? Because does it both, if you put something in the center of the intersection, do the corners of the intersection need to open up a little bit and change the curbs and the?
Typically not. Typically it's more of a swerve movement. And, if people slow down, that can be fine, right? If there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, ideally a driver of a motor vehicle is not also going into that crosswalk just to swerve around a traffic circle. I have seen that happen, fortunately not while a pedestrian was in the crosswalk.
Sure.
But it's kind of a parallel move. You're trying to go around a circle, but to do that, you have to kind of go into the side street a little bit.
So my last question, and I'll let other people who have their hands up talk. This seems like something that Public Works can start taking a look at as the timetable comes up to develop these roads anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of the same opinion as you, that it might not make sense to try to put in some of these features immediately, when 2 years from now they might have to be torn right back out as we do other road construction. So it seems to me that this is something we can maybe look at, but that may be in the depending on the road and depending on the section of the road, that may be 2 to 5 years out for any one particular segment. Is that sort of a good rough guess, or am I totally speaking out of turn here?
I can't speak to the timing. I know what the current 5-year plan is, and like I say, I'm maybe a week away from finding out what the next staff recommended 5-year plan is, but it'll go through Public Works and Plan Commission and Council before adoption. So everything's subject to change. There are maybe 10 factors we're trying to balance.
Sure.
And it's kind of a juggling act with Middleton Beach Road having thrown things off some.
Right. Okay. I've had my questions answered, so I'll shut up and let the next person talk.
We have three people that have their hands up: Nate, Carrie, and Ella. So Nate, will take you first.
In the meantime, going off of Robert's comments there, maybe the way we could use code and color, to make those traffic circles the right geometry and see how it works. That's just a low cost, almost no cost option, before anything happens. Then you can kind of see how it works. It's one option.
I missed the first part of that, Nate. My speakers may not have been great. Could you repeat the suggestion?
I sure can. So in the meantime, it sounds like it's going to be at least a couple of years before anything's done. Maybe we could use cones and some chalk, or some what they call tactical urbanism, where it's just kind of set it and monitor it, see how it works before you go all in on a traffic calming feature. You can at least monitor it for a while and see if it's a good solution or not. Just a thought.
And we have done that actually on Stonefield Road, where we set a bunch of drums out to see if the neighbors liked it or hated it. The downside with that is visually drums are very, very different than a low curb that has some plants behind it. And people might hate the aesthetics of it, and people are scared of orange drums, which is a good thing if you're working behind an orange drum, but it might give sort of a false sense of acceptance.
I think there's some other applications too. It doesn't have to be an orange drum or an orange cone. There's some white pillars that are made from plastic that could go around the radius or something.
Some delineators, yeah. So I'm just saying, that was the feedback we heard on Stonefield when we had tried it, is they sort of hated it, but that we didn't know if that translated.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm wondering if because I agree with what you're saying, Robert, that I think long-term, it makes sense to incorporate some of these traffic calming features with our design, because we try to think about that in all of our street projects, but especially Elmwood, given the concern here. But I'm wondering if there's something in the short term, just because I know the nature of our planning, like the road projects tend to get pushed out. So I just kind of, I'm just wondering if there's some kind of short-term options. And I really liked your idea, Katie, of the traffic circles that can be retrofitted. So it's not a waste, right? We can use that again. So I'm wondering, could we do some analysis to see what the cost would be at this point? Like, could we look into this a little bit more just to see the timing, how long would it take to implement and how much would it cost? And again, the placement, like where would we exactly want to place these?
Yeah, the cost, fortunately, of taking out some blacktop and putting in some curb isn't going to be monumental. It's in the low thousands of dollars, but not in the tens of thousands of dollars to do something like that. What I don't know yet is when we might reasonably reprogram the road, and what the scope of work of the future road project is going to be right now. So that's all. I don't think it's a huge risk if we want to jump ahead and put a traffic circle in. And maybe we won't have to take it back out.
Ella?
I think the traffic circles are a great way to slow cars down, but I guess I was wondering if a bicyclist and a vehicle could be in the traffic circle at once, or would it be safe for them to be in it at the same time, or how would that work with?
When I've ridden my bike through there, and I ride my bike more than I drive, I would say, that's a take the lane kind of situation. So a car driver has to some degree, swerve to go around these things. A bicyclist can more or less just go straight ahead, and effectively they transition from the right side of the lane to the left side of the lane by just holding a straight line. So they effectively take the lane by not doing anything.
Okay.
But any car behind them pretty much has to slow down to bicycling speed. There's just no viable way to pass.
Good to know. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from Bike and Ped?
Or from Public Works?
So Sean, are you going to see about looking into what it might take to do something if we came up with an idea of where retrofitting something?
Yeah, if you know what you want to try to retrofit and where, I think then it's just a matter of how do we get it budgeted. But it's not going to take a ton of design. It's not going to take a ton of staff time to coordinate that.
Very good. Thank you.
Dan, I had a question.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Jim.
What are the dimensions of these traffic circles, roughly?
Oh, I would say in a ballpark sense, 8 to 10 feet diameter.
And height-wise?
Really low. They're largely mountable curb, like you'd find at a driveway.
Okay.
4 inches high, give or take, probably with some mounded soil behind it.
One of the questions I had, do they make portable versions of these?
Maybe. I don't know how they would stay in place. You might be able to nail it into pavement.
But that would be, that would be an option, because if you try it, it doesn't work. Or if you want to just try it in one place or then try it in a different location. Just a thought.
Yeah, good thought. Okay, if there's no more questions or comments.
Oh, wait, Dan, Carrie had. Nope.
Sorry, I had one more comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
It's okay. I just thought of this. I know that there was some concern about maintaining the plantings, but I think we could come up with some creative ways, especially, if the neighborhood would want to do that, that's great. But perhaps there could be another city committee, right? We could have a plantings committee or something that would form, or schools, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of nonprofits, a lot of, I think, options that we could come up with. So I wouldn't want that to limit our thinking on this.
Yeah, Carrie, I agree with you. And it would be real critical to get the right choice of plants that are somewhat salt resistant.
Carrie, just to clarify, did you mean school professionals, not school children?
No, right. Yes. Yeah, associations. Yeah.
I was just freaking out a little bit.
But Sean, some of the high school students have to put in volunteer hours.
Yes.
And if they were supplied with some safety vests, I think it would be doable. Don't freak out, Sean.
But they have to sign a liability waiver, and I don't know that the school district wants to promote something that requires students to waive liability.
Got it.
We could look into it.
Now I'm freaking out again, Susan.
Well, let's not have any freaking out here.
Yeah, I think it'd be better to have students work off the road, building things not in the middle of traffic, and then, or painting things or whatever it is, planning. but you know, by the time it comes down to putting something in the road, I wouldn't suggest that we have untrained people, whether they're kids or adults, you know, volunteering to be in the middle of a road with cars coming at them.
In
As
terms
somebody-
of the plantings, I think if we choose the right things, it would probably be city staff dump some mulch on it and you cut the daylilies down in the fall. And that could be, that's not a huge amount of work to do.
Well, that's all a ways down the road. We still have to find
Yeah.
out how we can get these things built before we have worry about who's taking care of the plantings that are in them.
Right.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. If that's all for the comments with that, I think that's it for the folks for Public Works.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for attending.
Thank
We
you for
appreciate it.
joining us.
We will, Bob, need a motion to adjourn Public Works.
Public Works, someone have a motion to make to adjourn the Public Works portion of this meeting?
Oh, Don,
And this is Robert Burke. I would second Don's motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, Public Works Committee members?
No.
Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the Public Works portion of this event is hereby adjourned.
You're of course
you,
welcome to
everyone.
stay.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you
Bye.
coming.
Yeah,
You guys
nice
are
meeting
a
with
cool
you.
group. Join us again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, Mark, you made it back?
Yep.
All right. Let's move on.
Although I got the same notice again, it popped up again 10 minutes ago. So I'm just going to proceed here since Daphne's going to stay on the line as well.
Just
Right,
keep that
Daphne?
button.
Yes,
Well,
I'll be here.
after 3 times, I think it just reboots. I was burned by that once a few months ago, but we'll keep plugging ahead here. So.
All right. Let's move on to complete streets.
So this has been a work in progress along with the sidewalk funding memo for longer than I would like to admit, and I apologize for the length of time it's taken to bring this to you. So what I have in your packet for this item is a memo, as well as links to some other resources, especially Madison and Sun Prairie, and then also an excerpt from the city's comprehensive plan. It might be a good place to start. Our comprehensive plan adopted last year identified the desirability of adopting and implementing a complete streets policy so that the design and operations of the entire right-of-way balance the safety and convenience of all road users, regardless of age, ability, or mode of transportation. And then specifically the plan on this page, whatever page that was, 50, no, I can't see the page number here. Well, anyway, it's in your packet, obviously. So here's the action statement in the left column. So that was adopted last year. What I'm providing you this evening in the packet are some resources to show you what Madison and Sun Prairie are doing in particular. They have, in the last 2 to 3 years, been doing this work. Madison's actually integrating it with the Green Streets concept. And that actually is an ongoing project right now. That's something they currently are working on. So it's timely to be discussing the cities, what the city of Middleton is going to be doing. I did check with Fitchburg. They have not adopted a policy. I didn't survey other communities. I kind of felt that was in some ways irrelevant anyway, because this is our comprehensive plan and our priorities for this, for our community. So anyway, so the concept of a complete green street versus what Sun Prairie has done, which was just integrating the complete street concept without the green component. There are some model languages or model ordinances or policies, policy positions, policy statements that are available from Wisconsin Bike Fed, nationally, the Complete Streets Coalition, and then just a link on the importance of walkability, a few years old. So that's all I have as background. Communities have been adopting this primarily by, I mean, sometimes it's an informal policy, but it could be more formally adopted as a resolution, even potentially by ordinance. There's a list here that, let me see if this, do you now see that or not? Do you see what I just opened?
No.
You don't
No.
see-
No,
Yeah, so this is why I struggle with this. I just opened the bike fed listing. Let me just see if I can share that quickly. Here it is. Okay, so here's an inventory, which looks to me like it's a few years old because the most recent one is from 2018. So it just shows you what other communities have been doing, adapting their own versions of complete streets ordinance. So we don't have to start from scratch is the point I'm trying to make. Dan, I would just turn it over to the committee for discussion, guidance. We're here to listen to you and support your work, and whatever direction you want to go. It is something that Daphne and I both feel strongly about and want to move forward with to support the committee's work in this area.
Do any committee members have any thoughts, questions? Are we agreed as a committee that the idea of a complete streets policy is something that we want to pursue?
yes,
Would that be an accurate statement?
that's an accurate statement, at least for me.
Are there any other members that have an opinion?
I guess I'm confused what the Green Street portion of it means for Madison. It looked, by reading this paragraph, it looks like they just assess it case by case. Which is kind of what Middleton does right now, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm thinking of the Mayflower example that we had a few months ago where, there was talk of a sidewalk going in, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen because it was based on that context of that neighborhood. Am I understanding that right?
Mhm.
It was more than a few months ago, I think, where the Ped Bike Transit Committee weighed in and Public Works Committee. I think that discussion was a year or two ago. Susan, you as Public Works, you can probably speak to it better than I can.
I don't remember the time, but
Okay.
that road's been reconstructed for at least a year to a year and a half, or maybe longer.
Yeah, I thought it had been, but I don't travel on that road, so I couldn't remember the status of it. But Nate, your bigger point is that we have, I think, speaking from a staff perspective, we definitely have been trying to think of complete streets and design as we've looked at projects. We're always proposing sidewalks in conjunction with projects, and sometimes they are not included because of neighborhood opposition or impact on trees, loss of trees, whatever the reasons are. And that, of course, links to the next agenda item, which is changing how the city funds the installation of sidewalks. Oops, I got the note again. But obviously there's more to a complete street than just having a sidewalk. There's also making sure that people who are in the street or crossing the street as pedestrians, vulnerable roadway users, bicyclists, anybody using the street, calming traffic, taking steps to not just have it be auto oriented is really our goal.
I think that kind of plays into the discussion that we were having. At least this is kind of my vision of complete streets. It kind of plays into this discussion that we were having earlier this evening with Public Works, where as Bike and Ped, we were very interested in having the street be designed, Elmwood, we were talking about specifically, be designed with traffic calming measures, enhanced traffic calming measures as part of the design. So for a complete streets policy, I kind of see that as a guiding blueprint or outline to go to Public Works, saying that this is the way we want when we go to design new roads, when we go to do roads. I'm not talking about necessarily retrofitting, but when we go to rebuild roads, this is how we want to do that. Is that not an accurate representation of what a complete
I mean,
streets policy is?
I think the idea is to make sure that you think of that someone who's designing a roadway, whether it's new or retrofitting, thinks of all the measures that you can reasonably think of to make the road as safe as possible for all users. So you could think of it as a checklist, I suppose. Make sure that we, are considering the effect on speeds or crosswalk visibility. There's all sorts of our neighborhood traffic management program that Alder Olson cited at the last meeting, and Dan, you did too. That actually has some of the same concepts in terms of techniques for choking the travel lanes down or having bump outs at intersections to shorten the distance that pedestrians are in the street. So the idea of a policy is just to make sure that it's that all these techniques, if you will, are at the forefront of the thought process when engineers are tackling the design of a street.
And can I follow up on that with a real specific example?
Please.
Last Public Works meeting, we were meeting with the developer of Bell Farms for the design of Bellefontaine Boulevard. And I am really pleased with that developer. She wanted to make it as safe as possible for pedestrians, bikers to slow traffic down. And we were having issues with what the ordinance said for the radius of curves. And our ordinance doesn't allow the curves to be quite as tight as she wanted to be slowing stuff down. So I think we need to have a good policy and even possibly look at some of the ordinances so that, especially for when we have a developer that's trying to build a good, safe street that encompasses all these things we want, it can get done. So.
Yeah, I agree, Susan. So Mark, help us out here. Give us an idea of what the next step is, because I think that the committee seems to be in agreement that we want to pursue a complete streets policy. We want a policy that will actually, move forward and be used as a document in the redesigning or designing of any new streets in Middleton. So how do we get this to that point?
So I would take the direction, which I'm not surprised by this direction because we adopted it as a in our comprehensive plan. I think the best way to do this probably is by resolution. I can double check with our city attorney about an ordinance, but I don't see why we would need to do it as an ordinance. But I will come up with some model language. I'm hoping it's one of the shorter ones and not, I don't think we have to have something be too comprehensive that lists all the various techniques. I think it's just a clear statement of the policy that we, at the forefront, at the outset of a street design or redesign process, these are the sorts of things that we should keep in mind, planners and engineers, as we develop neighborhoods. Just
Mark,
to make sure.
I think we maybe do need to look at a little bit of the ordinances, because we actually did get for that street a compromise, and Sean had to put in the minutes that we weren't following the ordinances.
So I think as part of I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There was somebody.
So I think we need to look at that.
So I think one thing is an assessment of our existing ordinances that might be counter or contrary to complete streets. I think that's a key part of it. And so I think that's really good feedback. I will put that in our minutes too.
Okay, are there any more questions or comments? So Mark, then you're going to be looking at talking with and looking at putting together a resolution?
Well, or ordinance, I'll figure that out. I'm sorry, I haven't prioritized this enough with the other work that I've been doing. But obviously this is now coming from the comp plan as a recommendation to proceed. It's a high priority item. And so what I'd like to do is for the next meeting, have a draft that you can consider for and provide any feedback on a draft. So hopefully by, let's say by May, early May.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, the other projects I've been working on are I've got some active projects, but a couple of them are winding down. So I don't want to overpromise, but I also want to make sure we have a timeline for getting it done. So let's say the meeting in May.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mark. If there's no further questions or comments on that, we'll move on to sidewalk funding.
Yes, let me go back to the, let's see, I think there's, so Daphne and I have put together a memo. Daphne took an early shot at it last year with working with one of our interns at the time. And then I updated it in the last week here to reflect some additional activity at the federal level with infrastructure, but the infrastructure bill. This is also something that has come up previously from council members, Alder Olson and in particular, and I think Alder West and Alder Ramsey, both the three of you, I think are the ones that have been really trying to pursue this. But the question is, how can we make the environment in the city, make it easier to install sidewalks without having the opposition that has been surfacing, oftentimes because people don't want to be assessed, which is of course what our policy has been over the years. So in a nutshell, we were asked as staff to look at other options, and that's what this memo does, is looking at other funding options. And ultimately what we concluded is that it's, I'll just read this quickly since it's short. It's difficult to find grants for sidewalk funding unless we are able to wrap these new sidewalks with other major infrastructure projects, or unless new funding sources flow from passage of the Federal Transportation Reauthorization Bill, which is something that just happened in the last couple of months. For city streets located outside a TIF district expenditure area, the two funding options appear limited to capital borrowing, and then of course the city paying for it or paying either all or a portion of it, and the balance being assessed to adjoining private property owners. In the past, our policy has been to assess property owners 100%. We think from a importance, you'll recall a map, which I guess would have been good to put in this packet. I forgot about that, but we had previously as a committee looked at a map of where sidewalks were missing in the city. If you remember that map, the Middleton Industrial Park is, so in other words, the business park west of Costco and north of Highway 14. There are no sidewalks there at all. And so that is an area that we feel has the most promise for garnering the higher, more, would be more competitive for a grant for funding for these programs that are surfacing. I did put in your packet, by benefit of serving on the MPO last week, we started reviewing scores, reviewing TAP grant applications, so Transportation Alternative Program applications. And I noticed, I think I put it in here. Where is that? Sorry about the scrolling. There was a project in Madison. Where is it? Here it is. So it's called North Madison Safe Routes to School Improvements. And so as I was preparing for it and attending the meeting and learned more about this, this is essentially putting sidewalks on along a couple streets in Madison. Did I put the map in here too? I don't think I put the map in here. So this is a part of the community near a couple schools north of Warner Park, and they actually applied, Madison applied for Transportation Alternative Program funding, and it looks like it's the project rank is out of, I don't know, dozen projects, whatever it was, 10 projects. It's being ranked by MPO staff as 7th in priority, recommended for funding. So I think looking at projects on a individual street basis, like Middleton Beach Road or Mayflower or Forest Glade, the streets we've looked at over the last couple of years, those are not going to qualify. Those are not going to be competitive. But looking at an area like the business park, I think makes it much easier to look at that as a more significant project. And obviously, there's a lot of jobs out there, a lot of people who might not have a vehicle or want to take a walk during their break or whatever, which does happen out there. And so I think that's something that we've always felt would be important to get sidewalks out there. So that would be the most likely funded project with this program.
Does anybody have any questions for Mark?
Daphne, did you have anything you wanted to add too, since you were involved in the memo?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, I think the main focus is to like look at an area, right? Or like as we were saying earlier with University Avenue, like looking at the whole corridor as opposed to just, if you remember the map, it was literally just, like one block of like a neighborhood street. Like those kinds of things might not are not going to score high on a lot of grants. But if we look at, the whole like industrial park area or something like that, that could do a lot better in the scoring for grants.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, if we have no questions, Mark, do you have any updates?
No, but I guess I would like some feedback from the council members, not just questions. I'd like to know more about any direction you'd like to provide, because I just would like to make sure that we are answering the question that you asked us.
Is in regards to the funding?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard. I've heard from Alder Ramsey, but I'm just wondering if there's something else specifically that you want us to research, or if you are satisfied with. Does this fulfill the request that you made of us?
It pretty much answers the question for me. I mean, it sounds like exactly what you said for some of the issues that we've had recently. Funding is going to be very difficult, and it's going to be a case-by-case basis, and it's going to be a larger project if we hope to get any kind of grants. So we're back to where we were. The council will have to make a policy decision as to using capital borrowing or assessing the property owners.
Or, we can try and take a shot at applying for a grant for example, for the business park. And the other thing we'll do is we're going to keep in close contact with MPO staff. So as these new rules, as they're promulgated from the infrastructure bill and the federal transportation reauthorization bill, certainly we will keep an ear open for any opportunities there for new grant programs. I mean, that's definitely something we do. We try to do that as much as we can. Alder Olson has her hand up, by the way.
Yeah, and Alder West wants to.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to mention that with the Complete Streets program, sometimes there's grants available for that also that may come with sidewalks. Not sure, but I just want to make sure that that's all going to be in play once we get the Complete Streets program. Thank you for your work on that.
Kathy.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think at Public Works, we made a motion and sent it to council that when roads are reconstructed and they need to have sidewalks added, we will be paying for them as part of the construction cost. Could you look into that, Mark? It came up after we did what was it, Meadowbrook and that area.
Okay, thanks for refreshing my memory. It doesn't ring a bell at the moment, but I will check.
Well, I know we had a lot of discussion at it at Public Works, and it was a motion made by Robert Burke. And it should have gone to council.
Okay, thank you.
Katie, do you have any comments?
No, I like the idea of applying for a grant for that area in the business park. I mean, it's worth a shot if you guys are willing to do the grant application. I know those aren't easy.
Well, and a lot of times, you know, the funding cycle for the TAP grant is, there's only certain times, it's probably a biannual every 2-year cycle, I think. So I'll check on that, but thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other feedback? And Mark, you said there were no updates. With that, then,
oh, well, I can give you a quick update. I didn't list any, but North Mendota Trail wise, we are, we've received they're essentially 100% completed plans now. Sean Stowski in the Public Works Department is reviewing the North Mendota Trail plans, the east segment, and hopefully we'll get to comments. If he didn't do it today, it should be this week. And then I've reached out to all the property owners, have made contact with the 5 that are affected. We are putting together the easement agreements. I should be getting those in hand in the next couple of days, and we'll put them into, send them the easement agreements that we need for the permanent access easements, as well as the temporary construction easement. We have an on-site meeting tomorrow. I won't be there, but Abby's going to fill in with KL, meeting with the Rolling Hill Condo representative to discuss how the project affects their association. And we've come up with a value for the landscaping, the impact. We might be funding a fence on top of a retaining wall. So anyway, we're doing a lot of moving parts right now, but the goal is to try and go out for bid with this in the next few weeks. They'll go through the Public Works Committee for authorizing the bid, and then awarding the bid once we have the easement agreements in hand, hopefully in April. That's the goal.
Very good, Mark.
For construction this year.
Very good, nice work. I will be with Abby tomorrow at that site meeting, so that's.
Oh, you're going to be there. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
Yeah, and just so you know, a heads up, I was surprised when I got the dollar amount on Friday. I was surprised it wasn't higher in terms of the value of the existing trees, which there's several there that are quite mature. I think the value was something like the 2.5 times value was $7,100, $7,200. But we had KL's landscaping professional is the one who came up with the values, just like the same process we did for the west segment, Harbor Village, etc. So I'll be curious to know how that meeting goes tomorrow. Hopefully we have a willing property owner, as you all know, or I'll remind you, if you don't remember it, it's we cannot condemn for property acquisition, and so we're asking for easements. In exchange, the city is offering to take on maintenance and perpetuity, both pavement repair and snow removal for the 10-foot wide path that replaces the sidewalk. That's my update.
Okay, thank you for that update. Well, if there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I suggest we adjourn.
Does anybody want to second that suggestion?
I will second that suggestion.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
all. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.